Hey everyone, welcome to the latest edition of Do It with Brio. I'm really excited today to welcome Jolo onto the show. And the reason I'm excited is because we're going to talk about a subject which I experience all the time when I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to candidates. Really, the mental health around job hunting, which can be a really mentally challenging time for so many people at the moment. Hey, Joel, would you love to jump in and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Joel Low. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been practicing for about a decade now, I think, and I run a center called the Mind Psychological Services and Training. And I'm a clinical psychologist, so I typically work with clients with a host of mental health difficulties, from your day-to-day ones like stress and communication issues, all the way to your bipolar
Mm,
disorders and OCDs and that kind of stuff. Lah.
wow,
Mm.
fantastic. Actually, have you ever been unemployed yourself? Have you ever been in a position where you're concerned that you're unemployed and concerned about the ability to get a new job?
Um, I think my experience is a bit different, right? So as a clinical psychologist, we are required to do a fair amount of studying before we are let out into the wild, so to speak, lah, right? So unlike most professions where you graduate a degree and then you go job hunting, I've had to do my honors and then my masters after that. So I was a post student for a very very long time, lah, right? So I think it was a trade-off. Like, so I
Mm,
started entering the workforce a bit later, but what that meant was that once I got my masters, it was that much easier to get a job. I think because there's not many of us, anyways, right? I think the latest numbers put
yeah,
us at what
yeah.
250 around there, clinicians in Malaysia, clinical psychologists in Malaysia. So that
Wow.
was my experience, right? So it's a bit different. So I was unemployed for the longest time, but because I was studying. But once I graduated, it was
Mm,
relatively easier to get a job. But that being said, in Malaysia, the clinical psychology field is a bit, there's not many full time positions available. More often than not, it's one where you are working
mm,
as a consultant for multiple centers. Lah. So that can get a bit unnerving sometimes, right? And that could quite be similar to
mm.
people who are looking for jobs or unemployed at the moment. Lah. Mm.
No, understood. I spend, as a recruiter, I spend most of my life talking to candidates, um, whether I'm trying to
Mhm.
hire them for my own company or if I'm working for certain NGOs or working with government-linked companies to work on various initiatives linked to employment. I spend so much time talking to candidates, and I talk to many who are, you can tell straight away that they're very, very demotivated.
Right, right.
But then there's some who are past that. You can tell that they've got very low
Hmm.
self-esteem and they're bordering on depression.
Right.
And when someone's demotivated, I kind of know how to deal with that. Right,
Mm.
I've managed lots of teams, large teams, and worked with lots of people, and it's a common problem in all walks of life that people get demotivated, and I kind of know how to prep people up. But I don't know how to deal with someone who has gone beyond that
Mm.
and is does actually have a mental health issue caused by the stress of job hunting.
Right.
Um, as a random person on the end of a phone, mostly I do these
Yep.
interviews over a phone or a video call. They don't know who I am. We just start a conversation and go from there. As almost a random person, how can I play lead a positive or have a positive impact on that person's mental health issues?
I think you can definitely, because I think it's also really about. I think a lot of times the when someone is job hunting, and I've worked with quite a few people who have been in various stages of their employment or unemployment in that sense,
Mm,
lah, right? I think there are different factors in which the inability to find a job is going to impact them. I mean, obviously the most clear cut one is just not being employed. Like, I think that's definitely a big key item there, right? But I also think that in terms of the manner in which the interview goes along, the responses that they get from the interviewers, for example, and things like that, that's also definitely going to be play a big role in terms of how they feel after the session, right? For example, if a candidate doesn't fit, the role that you're hiring for, you could say, sorry, you don't fit the role, because you're not qualified, you're not certified, and XYZ ABC, and that's the standard way of doing things, right? But instead of focusing on the negatives, if you focus more on the positives and
mm,
suggesting that perhaps, hey, you're looking at this role here, but that doesn't seem to be the right one for you, and helping them to troubleshoot and maybe point them in the right direction, that could be actually a really good way to give them a little bit of a boost, right? Because it's such a big change, right? Usually, you just get rejected and that's
mm.
it, full stop. But here you are giving them some good functional, practical advice as well. And I think that could be a really good way to pick them up and give them a bit of a boost, I think.
Yeah, I think I think recruiters always come in for a bad rap. I think they've got very tight deadlines, and sometimes they just need to go from candidate to candidate to candidate. But sometimes taking two
Yeah,
minutes to be constructive, it can make a huge difference in people's life. I know it
correct.
because I've been on the opposite side myself, when people have either ignored me, or they've taken the time just to answer, and just to give me a one sentence a guideline to help me. It makes such a big
Yeah,
difference.
that's right. That's right.
But actually, I have had personal experience with being unemployed. When I moved to
Hmm.
Malaysia, it wasn't for a job. I moved here because my wife is Malaysian. So, and it took me probably 6 months of job hunting
Wow.
before I found a job.
Right.
And especially for a non-Malaysian living in Malaysia without a work
Mm,
permit, it makes it
right.
doubly hard, because no one wants to sponsor a work permit. So I've been in that position myself, and I think for me, the issues that I found were three key issues. One is that you've got no
Hmm.
income coming in,
Hmm.
and obviously the world is built around money. And if you've got no money coming in, it severely limits what you're able to do.
Right.
Um, the constant rejection,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think when you're job hunting, I can't think of another time in a person's life where they receive as much rejection as they do
Yeah.
when they're job hunting. Unless you're a salesman and you're being rejected every day by
Right.
clients,
Right.
job hunting is the time of your life when you receive the most rejections, and it's tough. And then the third factor is just the uncertainty about your life.
Hmm.
That you don't know what's going to come next. You don't know what's happening. You don't know how long your job hunting is going to last.
Right.
Um, which of these three factors do you think plays the biggest part on people slipping into kind of mental health issues when they're job
I think
hunting?
of the three that you mentioned, I think I gravitate more towards the final one, the third one, where there's no answer. There's this sense of uncertainty and there's no end in sight, lah. I think a lot of times,
Mm,
human beings, we actually do enjoy and also thrive on knowing things or doing things with some finality in mind. Like we know there's an end point, we know there's an end goal and things like that, right? And many times when you speak to people, it's the uncertainty of it that really gets to them, because I just don't know what's going to happen. And the human mind is a wonderful thing in the sense that you can think of things like Wi-Fi and StreamYard and Zoom calls and things like that. It's
mm,
brilliant, right? You can think about a lot of fantastical stuff. But it also means that when we encounter something with no answer or no end in sight, right? It means also that our mind goes into hyperdrive and thinking about all these negative scenarios or negative doomsday catastrophic kind of situations occurring in that sense, lah, right? So it's not just about not finding a job. It's so normal for us to then amplify that to me, being homeless, not being able to start a family, can't take care of my loved ones. It just, it mutates, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think of the three that you
yeah,
mentioned, I think
snowball.
that's probably it snowballs definitely, right? I think that's definitely the biggest one that would impact a lot of people, lah. And I think I probably throw one more in the ring, right? I think one more thing that makes it so difficult is that in our modern day society and culture, especially in Malaysia, lah, so much of identity is centered around our jobs, right? You go for dinners, you meet people for the first
Mm,
time, they ask you, hey, what do you do, right? And I think that's such a normal, off the cuff question to ask. And it's entered our psyche that our professions really are our identity, I think, right? And I think when we don't have one or we're
mm.
unemployed or in between jobs, it can be quite a struggle because, you tell someone that, oh, I'm unemployed, I'm not doing anything. It's not just a financial hit, but it's also an ego hit as well. I think that's also a big thing. I would assume a lot of people go through.
That's interesting, and I think it leads me on to a subject I've been waiting for an opportunity to talk to a professional
Right.
about. I did a podcast a few weeks ago about identities, and
Mm.
how we have different professional identities and
Right.
different home identities and different identities for different groups of friends, and how dangerous it can be to base so much of your identity around what you do
Right.
for a living.
Right.
Because when if you base so much of your identity and self-worth around it, when you do lose a job, it can be devastating to
Oh yeah.
your
Oh
mental
yeah.
health. But actually, I mean, I've heard people talk about it before, and the idea of these different identities and things like this. But I wasn't sure how much of it is just kind of pop psychology, and how much of it is actually really backed up with research and things like this.
Yeah, I no, I think a lot of pop psychology is grounded on good research, like good sound research. It just gets I don't know if I can say this word on air or not, but bastardized along the way, right? It just gets mutated, and people take on like 5% of it and they
Yeah.
just run with it, that kind of thing. But I think, John, you're absolutely right. Lah. I think it is a danger. It is something that is risky because when our sense of identity, when our self esteem, when our ability to gauge whether or not we're doing a good job or a bad job is centered around the work that we do, that means we literally are putting all the eggs into one basket. Lah. So when that basket goes away, we crumble, we absolutely get shattered. Lah, right? For example, if you know someone who prides themselves on doing a good job, like pleasing their bosses and their clients, for example, and that's the measure of their worth, lah, right? When that goes away and they don't have that measure anymore, then they start questioning, like, am I worth anything? Am I worth something, right? And that can be indeed very, very dangerous. And you see a lot of people who go into depression after that or experience like anxiety, panic attacks. Their struggles are stem from something like that, like when they lose that measure or that gauge of how competent they can be or they are, like, in that sense, like, right? So I think you're absolutely right, and I think it is something that is quite dangerous and quite tricky, lah, so to speak, lah, right? Um, so I think oftentimes the a good balm towards this is to make sure that you are agile, lah, in that sense, lah. Have different ways to have that gauge, different ways to measure how good or competent that you are, and also be able to have different ways to identify yourself, lah, in that sense, lah, not just with work, lah, but with other aspects as well, lah.
Mm. No, very interesting area, and it's an area
Mhm.
that I guess always concerns me about myself as well, because I know I get very involved in the work that I do and the companies that I work for.
Mm.
So it's a very interesting area. And I think I meant to ask you a question earlier when I was asking about what can I do when I'm on a call or an interview with someone to help them out of difficult situations. But when we're on the subject of that
Mm.
kind of pop psychology, are there things that I could do to make things worse? As in, I'm trying to help, but actually they have a more negative impact.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think one of the more it's starting to get more widely spoken about or known. This concept of toxic positivity. You know, where people think that, oh,
Mm,
you always got to be positive. You can't think negative thoughts. You always got to be on the ball and chasing and chasing. Look, we're human. You're human. I'm human, and it's absolutely normal within our range of normal human slash emotional functioning to feel sad and feel down. Right? You cannot get rejected to
yeah,
5 jobs, 6 jobs in a week and say I'm happy, I'm positive, I'm going to keep going. No, that's not. That doesn't make any sense at all, right? If you feel crap, you feel crap, and you need to acknowledge it and accept that that is what's going on and that's what's happening to me at the moment, right? And I think that's important because if we don't do that, if we're not true to ourselves or not congruent to what we're feeling, what's going to happen is that you're going to spend all these cognitive resources and capacity to try and feel good, be good, do good, that kind of thing. That and it's become so tiring that when we actually have a chance to go for an interview or to show our worth, like, I suppose to recruiters, that we don't, because we just have so much capacity spent up elsewhere, like other places, like that is not as useful for us in that sense, right? So I think that's a big
mm,
one. The other one is that whole concept of not resting, that hustle culture, that thing, people, entrepreneurs love saying that kind of thing, right? I think that's so incredibly uh, difficult as well, I think, that, to say the least, lah, because that's not true, lah, right? I think if you don't rest, you're gonna break down. Ultimately, if I run my computer for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at some point it's gonna break down. What more someone who's made out of flesh and bone and skin and things like that, right? I think you work hard, definitely, but I think you have to also factor in that you need time to rest and recuperate and sleep and all that kind of good stuff, lah. So take care of yourself. I think that's really important as well.
got it. Actually, when you do also lose a job, for many people they lose a huge social circle as well. I think, especially myself, I spend way more time with my colleagues, at least
Mm,
pre-pandemic, way more time with my colleagues than I do with
yep.
my friends and often my family too. And you you do know them very, very well. They're a huge part of your support group. And when you lose the job, you lose that
Yeah. Mm,
support group
yeah.
as well. I mean, do you think people who do not have circles of friends and support groups outside of work suffer much more when they lose a job than someone who does have those kind of large family, large groups of friends, etc.?
Definitely, right. I think I think when you lose your job, right, especially when those people whose social circle are do evolve around their colleagues and the people that they work with, right, what's going to happen is that, I mean, they're always still going to be there. Of course, they're still going to be your friends, but it just changes that much, in that sense, because now they're not someone you're around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for example, and things like that. That's one massive component,
Mm.
availability, right? But I think the second one that is also quite difficult is the whole idea about the shame that can be associated with losing a job sometimes, right? Obviously, there are different ways in which you can lose your job, lah, right? So just generally speaking, if it's something for a negative reason, for example, if I lose my job because I was underperforming, perhaps, do I really want to go back to work and speak to my friends who may perhaps know that, or they suspect that that's what happened? Probably not, right? And when you don't have any social resources outside, like family members, friends, even pets for that matter, right? It gets very, very difficult, because then it's not you and your quote unquote army against the world. It's you against the world, and I think that's incredibly scary and tiring for a lot of people, right? And also, even more practical matters, like things like, trying to reach out to your network to find more jobs, for example, job opportunities, for example, just having a place to crash if you, let's say, you lose your accommodation when you lose your job, things, small little practical things like that as well, can be so incredibly cumulative, like, over time, right? And can really be quite damaging to the candidate, like, in that sense.
Sorry, I forgot I had my mic muted then.
No worries.
But yeah, if I think about the tough times in my life, it is it's the friends and family that you fall back on, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't,
Hmm.
it's true. But again, from seeing it so many times, I've seen that job hunting can just become a vicious cycle as you get more unmotivated as you go, and you get more depressed as the lack of success just builds and builds and builds, and the more motivation that you lose, the less you're able to project confidence in interviews,
Hmm.
the less you're able to be the real you, and you just become a
That's right.
shell. How do you think someone can break that cycle? I mean, once they're in it and they've recognized that they're in that
Mm.
downward spiral, it's weird. I mean, I've been in situations where I just want to tell someone, just be confident, just be happy. But you know that it's easy to say that, but
Yeah.
it's not easy to do it. Easy to be it. What can people do to just break that cycle and start going again?
Yeah, yeah. You know what, though, John? I think for every time you say those things where you say be confident, smile, and things like that, I think that probably amplifies the problem even more, because now they already have one big set of problems they're
Mhm.
worried about, and you just tacked on another two, three things they need to worry about and be be mindful about, right? It's probably gonna make it even worse for them in that sense, right? Um, I think a good thing to do, and this is of course not applicable to everyone, but if you have the capacity to, you have the resources to do so, and you do find yourself in that kind of a negative spiral, right? Is just take a step back from the search, because I know sometimes when you're looking for jobs and things like that, it can be very, it can really. It's almost like getting stuck in quicksand. You can't get out of it. You're just surrounded by it, and it gets very overwhelming, right? And I
Yeah.
think if you have the capacity to take a step away from it, right? That means stop for a little while, do something, go do some charity work, for example, go be with family and friends, plant a garden, anything, whatever it is, just get out of that rut for a little bit, in that sense, and give your mind a bit of a circuit breaker, kind of a reset kind of thing, right? So that you can step away from the rejections, the negativity, and all that kind of crazy stuff that one goes through when they're unemployed and looking for a job, right? And I think that's probably what the most effective way,
Mm.
because that allows you to then get back on horse, so to speak, when you're good and ready to, and hopefully make you a bit more. You can showcase a bit more of yourself, rather than who you think you should be and who you think they want to see, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Now, for those of us who cannot afford that, who don't have the resources to take some time away, and finding a job is really quite critical, right? I think then it becomes a lot more important for us to be mindful on what we are trying to do, right? I think ultimately at the end of the day, if we try and accommodate, or we try and be who the recruiter wants us to be, or we try and guess or anticipate what is expected of us or what's wanted from us, right? I think it's going to put us in a situation where it's going to be very, very difficult. Because if you have, let's say, if I'm speaking to you, John, and I'm trying to anticipate what you are looking for with me, it's hard, but maybe I could try. But if suddenly you have a panel of three people in front of you, you're just gonna, you're gonna collapse. You can't do that, right? And if today is the first interview of five that I got lined up, by the time they
Mm.
hear the third one, you'll be just exhausted, right? So I think what's more practical would be to not do that, but really zoom in on yourself, like focusing on yourself and who you are and what you are able to provide and offer to the company that you're applying to lah. And I think the more authentic you are with yourself, I think the more it's going to show. They're going to see the confidence. They're going to see this is who you are. And you know what? I think in the long run, it might even be better for you and the company as well. Because at the end of the day, you are who you are, and they're going to get what they're going to get, and not some facsimile or some, character that you portrayed during the interview, which is going to be worse for everybody, right?
Yeah, I always tell people in an interview just to
Yeah.
just be yourself, just be authentic, because if you're pretending to be something that you're not and you get hired,
Right.
they're gonna expect you to be something that you're not for 6 months, a year,
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years. You have to keep this act up,
Right.
and it's keeping an act up can be more energy sucking than the actual job itself. Uh, the job takes up X amount of energy, but actually pretending to be this other person takes up even more
Exactly right.
energy.
Exactly right.
So I always just tell people be yourself, and if you don't get hired, it's probably
Yeah.
actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but unless, of course, some people just do need a paycheck, and it's hard. It's hard to really give
Right.
advice for to that person in that difficult situation.
That's right.
But actually, for someone who is maybe um, quite motivated already and very stable, but they're just starting
Mhm.
their job search. What advice would you give to them to make sure that they're able to stay motivated, that they're able to maintain their mental health through the job search journey, even if it doesn't
Mhm.
go very well? If you manage to talk to them before they even
Yep.
start, what kind of advice would you give them? Not so much about how to look for a job, but
Right.
how to stay motivated and how to stop yourself sliding into
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah. I
workplace.
think that's a fantastic question, and I think a lot of this is something that a lot of I think young graduates, fresh graduates, will be encountering. Right. I think one of the
Mm,
best ways you can do that is to even before you start the entire job search, like what you say, John. Right. I think it's to really manage your expectations. Lah. I think the whole idea of getting a job the first time go for an interview or the second time go for an interview or very soon after you graduate, like is this it's a good idea. It's something that is possible, but more often than not, sometimes it's not very realistic lah, in that sense lah. I think you probably know this better than I do, John.
mm.
Do you know the average amount of time that people take to get a job, their first job? Like, do you have any idea on that?
I don't know offhand, but I mean, people can
Right.
easily spend six
Right,
months,
exactly.
6 months
Especially if
easily.
you have a degree that's a very competitive one, like a business degree or an IT degree, for example. It's quite hard, right?
Yeah.
So I think the first thing that you can do, a really good thing you can do, is to just manage your expectations. I think if you build into this idea of job hunting that you are going to encounter failures, you are going to miss out on like dream jobs, ideal jobs, and things like that. That actually helps you manage those expectations and make you a bit more robust because then it's built into the entire experience. You know that's what's going to happen to you. You know that's what you're likely to encounter, and that's going to make it that much more. I wouldn't say palatable, but I think it's acceptable. Lah. I think it's something that we can say. Okay, this is part and parcel of that process. Lah. I think speaking to people like friends or people who've been through the process before, even people like you, like John, who are able to give such fantastic advice to young joiners and young employee prospective employees, like in that sense, like it's fantastic as well because then, like we talked about earlier on, the unknown is taken away and we make it known. We make it part of our expectations or part of our series of events that we have to go through, or the hoops we have to jump through, so to
Mm,
speak. And that can be really helpful make them stay motivated.
mm. One of the things that I found very useful is to also realign your
Yeah.
goals. So sometimes when you start job hunting, your goal is to get a job,
Mm, mm,
and that's something that you potentially have very little control over.
mm, mm.
Whereas you can set yourself many much smaller goals,
Yeah.
which you do have 100% control
Yeah. Yeah.
over, like optimize your CV,
Right.
or just write a better summary for your CV,
Mm,
write a better summary for your LinkedIn profile, take a better LinkedIn profile
mm.
picture, uh, get a recommendation from somebody, write a
Right.
reference, all these kind of smaller goals, which are a really important part of job
Hmm.
hunting. Start setting those small goals rather than setting the big goal. Um, and as you work your way through them, you'll be getting closer and closer to the larger goal, but you'll be hitting
Yeah.
goals constantly
Yeah.
rather than always missing the big goal.
Yeah, and we
Um,
actually do this in therapy as well.
I found out. I mean, yeah,
Oh, sorry, John. I think we missed certain time. I was gonna say it's a lot like therapy as well. So we get clients all the time who come in and say, "Hey, Joel, I want to be happy," and I'm thinking, okay, well, what does happy mean to you? How do you break down happy in your words so that we can make it nice and achievable? Exactly right. I think those were fantastic words you shared just now, John. Really great advice as well.
fantastic. So I think that covers everything I wanted to talk today
Ah, really?
about today, Joel.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for coming on. If someone watching this show does want to get in touch
Yeah.
with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So they've got a few ways. So the easiest way was just to head onto our website, themind.com.my, and you can check us out there. All our contact information is there. What we do is there, and all our profiles is there as well. We're on most major social media platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find us at the Mind PSAT. So that's Penang, Singapore, Australia, Thailand, right? The Mind PSAT, and we are trying to work our way towards becoming more of a. We're trying to reach out to the community as much as possible, right? So one of the things that we've been trying to do quite a bit
Yeah,
nowadays is to demystify psychology a little bit. I think therapists as like me, for example, we're really good at reading the textbook, but sometimes when we convey that textbook to the community, it can be a bit of a struggle. So we're trying very hard to do that to make sure that what we know is able to be disseminated lah. So what I've been telling my team of late is that
yeah.
if you can't translate this information and share that with your grandparents, you're doing it wrong. You do it again. Make sure you get it right, right? So we're trying to do a lot of that. So look out for that as well.
Fantastic. So thanks again so much for giving me some time to come on the show. Um, Everyone who's watching, I hope this has been valuable for you. I do spend a lot of time working with people who are job hunting, regardless of whether they're applying to work at Brio HR or if they're just looking for hints and tips on how to improve their job search. So please do get in touch with me if you feel the need. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day and do tune in for the next show.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.